Hi Acadiana, I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Welcome to your Friday. This is Let's Talk Tropics. Of course, we're going to be talking about all kinds of tropical waves that are out there, but for most of us, we're going to be talking about a disturbance 90L that is currently over parts of the Gulf of Mexico. And I've got the coordinates there on the left. Even though it's a disturbance and it doesn't have a very good chance of development, there it is, 27.5 north, 95.2 west. Winds are currently at 30 miles per hour and the pressure has dropped to 1009, and I've noticed that the pressure's dropped quite a bit here on land as well from when we left you yesterday. So let's get right into it. We do have cloud cover here in Lafayette, although there have been a few peaks of sunshine, so temperatures have gotten back into the lower 80s. I think we'll still hit about 84 for our daytime high, and our heat index is holding at around 91 with the dew point at 76 and that relative humidity now at 79%. Check it out. We've got generally dry roadways, at least here in Lafayette, but we have seen some occasional rain, and I think with some of this daytime heating, we may fill in the void again with the showers and thunderstorms. There still is a flood watch that's going to remain in place. Many areas along and south of I-10 have picked up over 4 inches of rain, and in some cases well above that. So any additional rain is going to cause some problems there in our coastal parishes especially, so the flood watch will remain in place. Looking here at the big satellite picture, there's a number of things that we're watching. Of course, we have disturbance 90L, which is right there, and that is going to continue to slide very slowly off to the east for a while. And then I think it's going to be impacted by a cold front that's going to be diving southward. Now, earlier in the week, we were thinking that this was just going to kind of get washed out or maybe kind of cruise its way off toward the east a little bit, but a lot of our global models and now a lot of our high resolution models are kind of pushing that low a little bit farther toward the south, and you got a tropical wave that's coming into the Yucatan Peninsula. So both of those combined are showing the possibility of maybe a chance for some development down in the Bay of Campeche. And there's a better look, and you can see there's been a bit of a low-level circulation right about in there. Might be in the mid-levels too. Yesterday, the circulation was more in the mid-levels, and then the lower part of the circulation was way offset. Also notice where you're seeing that spin there. Most of the thunderstorms are offset to the northeast there, so it isn't anything that's organized by any means, but it is going to start to grab on some of this tropical moisture down here to the south that's coming in from the Caribbean, and all of that is going to be converging there of the Bay of Campeche. Now, does that mean we're going to be seeing a tropical system develop down there? Right now, that doesn't seem very likely, although the models are showing some deeper pressures, maybe getting up to a tropical depression on most of the computer models, but there's still a couple of holdouts out there. We're just going with a broad area of low pressure. So, looking at the radar right now, you can see we've got more of a void in the rain here over the western part of Acadiana, and that is going to be the trend as this low kind of pushes a little bit farther to the east, but there's still a decent amount of moisture in place, and with these few breaks in the clouds allowing some sunshine to get through, you get some daytime heating, so this might fill in a little bit, and we're still going to be dealing with the possibility of some heavier downpours. We had a lot of heavy rain down over St. Mary and lower St. Martin and parts of southeastern Iberia Parish overnight and into the early morning hours, and the heavy rains continue in the offshore water. So our friends that are working out there, I know you're dealing with a rainy, windy day, and those seas have been pretty rough out there too. So we might see some more showers and thunderstorms developing in the areas where we're seeing more of a void, and I do believe that the rain showers and thunderstorms will continue over southeastern Louisiana. Again, for our friends out in the offshore waters, you're probably seeing some rougher seas around those bigger thunderstorms, and at times we could probably see those seas over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico getting in the 5 to 6 foot range and maybe even higher around some of the bigger thunderstorms that are out there. But still a pretty rough day in the Gulf of Mexico with winds out of the southeast at about 15 to 20 and gusty. and we'll also see those seas running about 3 to 4 feet, occasionally up to 5 feet. So there's disturbance 90L in its position, again 27.5 north and 95.2 west. Those winds are at 30 miles per hour. I've been looking at some of the offshore rigs too, and I've been seeing some wind gusts with some of the thunderstorms getting up over 40 knots. So we're kind of be swaying a little bit out there this time around. And here's a look at some of the computer models. So the low is right here right now, and what's kind of unusual is this is forecast to kind of drop down into the Bay of Campeche and then hang there for a day or two and then kind of turn its way back toward the north. So if you're looking at the numbers that are on here, the UK2 here, this is the blue line, you can see how that one goes around and then comes back like this. And generally, most of them are kind of backing off to the southwest and then turning back northward toward Texas. But the numbers that are on here, that's the hour. So 120, that's 5 days out. 72, that's 3 days out. 48, that's 2 days out. Just to kind of give you an idea on some of the timing. So really anything, if it's going to turn around in this area, that's probably not going to occur until the early part of next week. So Texas and Mexico will probably continue to see some decent amounts of rain from this low, but there are still some models that are getting this up into the tropical depression mode. Tropical depression is anything that's below this line right here, but above that line right there pretty much. So some of the models are giving it a run at a tropical depression. Got a handful of them here that are getting it up into tropical storm strength. Again, here are your hours: 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. And even one pushing it way up at the top end of a category of a tropical storm, getting very close to a Category 1 hurricane. But the consensus of these keep it either as a non-tropical low, a tropical depression, or a very weak tropical storm, and that's based on most of our hurricane models. The other piece of the puzzle here, and we've talked about this pretty much all week, is a tropical wave that early in the week was coming through the Windward Islands, is now making its way onshore of the Yucatan Peninsula. And there's a lot of moisture. You can see there's tons of clouds and rain over Honduras, Nicaragua, getting into the Yucatan to Belize and into Mexico as well. And gradually this is going to be sliding off toward the west into the Bay of Campeche. And could that be feeding our low that's currently there? Or will we see a new low develop? So we're going to take the models. Usually we go out 10 days. But because what we're looking at here is really going to be focusing on the next 5 days, we'll only go out 5 days on our global models. So just kind of let it run over and over here. This is the GFS, and you can see it starts there, drops a little bit farther to the south, maybe gains a little moisture, and then kind of turns its way back and moves inland over Mexico, but then wants to hug the Texas coast going into the early part of next week. The Euro, which has really not been buying on this tropical wave, or the low pressure area that's 90L, seems to be biting a little bit more in the last 24 hours. So the low hovering there off the Louisiana coast, kind of pushing southward, maybe grabbing a little moisture from the tropical wave, and then going out 5 days, it's just kind of hanging out there as a low pressure center over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico. Canadian model has been a little more aggressive with this. Again, keeping the low along the Texas coast, dropping it southward, grabbing some moisture from the tropical wave, and then more of a westward movement toward Mexico. But the remnants bringing some heavier rains possibly there along the central and upper western or eastern coast there of Texas. And then the icon, and if you've been with the show throughout the week and even last week, you know the icon has been desperate to develop a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. It is still trying to do that, and going out 5 days, it drops its way down into the Bay of Campeche, again gathers a little bit of moisture and strength, and then starts to make its return as our cold front starts to erode, and the icon model wants to try to bring something closer to us as it gets down the road going into the early part of next week. So we're going to stop this on Monday afternoon. There's just to give you the idea of the agreement between the models, because if you've watched the show over the course of the week, we had a couple of days where there was no agreement whatsoever, and 1 or 2 days where they were starting to come together and look a little bit more similar. But I will tell you that this time around, pretty much all 4 of the global models that we look at are indicating deepening low pressure area over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico near the Bay of Campeche. So this is Monday afternoon's GFS model. We'll compare that with the Monday afternoon Euro. Now the GFS is a little bit stronger, a little bit deeper low pressure area than the Euro is, and the GFS is a little bit farther to the south than what the Euro is. But still, that frontal boundary that's going to give us a decent weekend is going to block anything from coming in our direction at least through Sunday. And then depending on what that front does and which way the high pressure ridge starts to slide, if it slides more to the east, that would give us more of a southerly flow that might help to pull it a little bit farther to the north. So let's get into the Canadian model. Again, Monday afternoon, very similar to the GFS, but not quite as deep as the Euro model. So the Canadian model on Monday has a tropical depression maybe moving its way toward the Mexican coastline, and the farther out days, going out to 5, 6, 7 days, drags this inland over northern parts of Mexico, and then the remnant moisture starts to work its way back to the northeast. Not as a tropical system, just a low pressure area that's over land. And then finally the icon, which again, as I said, has been the one that's been pretty much desperate to develop a tropical system in the Gulf of Mexico for about 2 weeks now. Again, brings this down to the south into the Bay of Campeche and then starts to retreat its way back to the north. So on Monday, we could possibly, according to the icon again, could see a tropical depression or maybe even a tropical storm. And as I showed you earlier, the icon model tries to bring this back up toward the northern Gulf Coast, a little bit closer to where we are. So even though the scenarios on this really aren't very likely, the more we see these models start to agree with this scenario, the more there's a chance that we could see that. But the National Hurricane Center still has a very low chance that 90L or anything for that matter will be developing over the Gulf of Mexico. But when you got something close like here, and we've seen things whip up quickly in the Gulf, Hurricane Umberto in '07 is the perfect example, which was really nothing and then went to a tropical depression up to a Category 1 hurricane making landfall in less than 18 hours. So it's always good that you're prepared well ahead of hurricane season, because there are occasionally things that can sneak up on you. Of course, it would be supported well because the water temperatures are so incredibly warm now over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico. The shear is fairly low to moderate there over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico, at least for today. So if the low starts to drift a little bit farther to the south, it would still be in an area that might have a little bit less wind shear here over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico, southern part of the Gulf of Mexico as well. And then going into the early part of next week, remember we've got that front that's going to be coming through this weekend. So there's going to be a lot of wind shear here along the northern Gulf Coast going into the early part of next week. But the GFS model is suggesting that maybe we'll have some slightly weaker wind shear in that area where a surface low wants to try to develop, whether that's 90L or the tropical wave that's coming in from the Western Caribbean, or a combination of both of those. So right now, it's something we're just going to continue to watch. I'm more excited about the cold front to come through this weekend to drop our temperatures, drop our dew points, and at least give us a little taste of fall. But I will be keeping my eye on this over the course of the weekend. Right now, not anticipating of doing Let's Talk Tropics over the weekend. But if things look a little bit more interesting, of course, I'll send you all an alert, and we would do something live either on Saturday or Sunday. So let's look out there and see what else is going on. Remember, we are getting very close to the peak of the hurricane season, and it has been a very unusual hurricane season. All of the things were pointing toward a very, very busy hurricane season. All of the factors were there, all of the signs were there, and so far we've only had just 5 named storms. So a lot of folks are kind of scratching their heads. A lot of it's been because the wind shear has been considerably high. There's been a lot of dry air, and there's been a lot of Saharan dust out there. But there's not much else to look at out here in the Atlantic Ocean. You got a bit of an upper level low that's there kind of streaming its way north of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. And then you've got a couple of tropical waves that are out in the Atlantic Ocean. And we're still watching this low pressure area that's here off the east coast of the United States. But according to the National Hurricane Center, basically all 4 of these areas have a low end chance of development, somewhere under 40%. So Again, they're not too excited about anything developing out here, but in the past we have seen some of these low-end tropical weather outlook blips on here eventually become a tropical system fairly quickly. So this could change, but right now, again, going with the National Hurricane Center's forecast, it looks like there's a pretty low-end chance that any of these are going to be developing into tropical systems. They're just going to be lows. They're still going to generate some wind and a lot of rain out there, but it would not be an actual official tropical system. But we are getting very close to the peak of the hurricane season. We're almost there. That's September the 10th. So what is that? 6, 7, 8, what is that? Tuesday is the 10th of, Tuesday is the 10th of September. So that's where we reach the peak. But you could still see that we still have, on an average season, a considerable amount of activity all the way through about the middle part of October, and really any time between the beginning of August and let's say about to October the 20th. That's when the peak of the hurricane season is for landfalling hurricanes here along the Gulf Coast. So could there still be something coming in? Absolutely. And even though it's been wonderful that we've only seen 5 named storms in a season that was predicted to be a record breaker, it still only takes one storm to really mess up your day. So on Fridays, just like on Mondays, on Fridays, I like to give you a little bit of a list, give you a little bit of a homework. If you have not gathered some of these items, they're still widely available. In fact, they're probably more than widely available. I did go to one big box store and noticed that they had several aisles of water stacked up. So it does appear that they're ready to sell you all of the items for hurricane season, but because things have been so quiet, it doesn't seem like folks have been really wanting to run out there and buy it. But if you get out there over the course of the weekend, and I know nobody wants to go shopping when the weekend's going to be so fantastic when it comes to the weather, but if you're out there and you're doing your normal chores, grab a couple of these extra items that are on the list, or maybe take care of these things, what you can do there at home. And then that way, if something is to turn in our direction or we get a tropical system that would threaten Acadiana, you will be way ahead of the game compared to most people, because a lot of people just like to wait to the last minute. Many are procrastinators, and I am on a lot of different things, but most of the things that are on this list right here, I took care of this several weeks ago, in fact, several months ago. So I would say I'm pretty ready, but you know, when it comes to when it hits the fan and you're going into a real tropical scenario with something threatening, there's always another list that I have to get to and see if I've got everything together. So if you can grab some of these things over the course of the weekend, again, you will be a step ahead of everybody else, and it will save you some time in the long run. Well, I hope everybody has a great weekend. Enjoy that cold front when it finally gets through tomorrow afternoon. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also turn on those notifications, and please tell your friends too. I really enjoy hanging out with everybody each and every weekday afternoon, talking about tropics and talking about weather. It's the thing I do. Have a great weekend. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker, and I hope to see you on Monday.